welcome back to our series on Star Wars Aftermath. If you are not familiar with what you're watching here, please click on the thing and it'll take you back to the beginning. But basically we're doing a in-depth, every couple of chapters look at the book Star Wars Aftermath by Chuck Wendig, and I'd love to have you join us, so if you're just joining us now, there's plenty of time to catch up. Let's get to today. Today we are discussing Chapter 11, which ended Part 1 of the book, Chapter 12, which kicks off Part 2 of the book, and the interlude on Waitir, that place. So getting right into it, we start at Chapter 11. Chapter 11 is with Admiral Ackbar. Curiously, I don't think they actually called him Admiral in the chapter. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I don't think they did. This kind of makes me think of what was going on with Wedge. Wedge doesn't have an official rank in the New Republic military when we saw him at the beginning of the book, because he doesn't really know what his role is. He just knows that he's important. I can see it being something kind of similar for Ackbar. What I found kind of amusing is we meet him as he's like Swolo Ackbar, like he's just exercising, and you just get a lot of descriptors about him, and I'm like, man, I never really saw Ackbar as like the silver fox, but I guess he's kind of a silver lionfish? Does that work? I don't know if that works. Also in this chapter, there's just a lot of little tidbits that I find interesting. For one, the ships are still repairing. A year out from Return of the Jedi, it really goes into how screwed the rebels were going to be if they didn't destroy the second Death Star, and really if they didn't kill the Emperor. Like, they put every single frickin' thing on the line to win in Return of the Jedi, and it was going to be victory or defeat at that point for them. And to show you just how uneven that was, the Empire is still kicking after Return of the Jedi, albeit weak, but making a play to come back again, and that's after they lost everything. The rebels would not have had that same chance if they had lost at Endor, at least based off of what we're getting here. And that kind of goes into a quote I wrote down, and I actually tweeted this out, and it's Ackbar saying, quote, "I know one day I will fail at this, and we almost failed above Endor. We rushed in, careless, and it almost cost us everything." You know, that kind of took me to The Last Jedi, oddly enough. I know one of the critiques of the film is how unceremonious Ackbar's death was in that film. It made me realize that Ackbar probably wouldn't have been a super fan of Poe's plan either. He may have seen the value to it more so than Leia, and I mean the one to attack the Dreadnought, and maybe even the one to go on the Snoke's ship. I don't think he would have necessarily been on board with a lot of it, because I think he understands you can't throw everything at a battle unless it's really the battle you have to throw everything at, if that makes sense. Sometimes you have to run away so you can have the opportunity to throw everything in. And it kind of makes me wonder, you know, what Ackbar felt in his final moments there because of something like this. Was it a peaceful, well, I guess this is my end, or was it a, you know, these kids, hopefully they learn from it kind of a thing? I don't know. I think that's kind of interesting, though. Another thing here that's kind of interesting, he's talking to, you know, a low-ranking person in the military, and they're listing off places where Wedge could be. And they mentioned 3 planets: Tatooine, Mustafar, Geonosis. This isn't just a cool Easter egg thing to Star Wars movies, and movies we've seen, or planets we've seen. That's what I was looking for. These planets are actually very close to each other. Tatooine and Geonosis obviously are very close, because in Attack of the Clones, Padme says Geonosis is less than a parsec away, and they ended up putting Mustafar close to there too because of, I think the reasoning why Mustafar had to be close to Geonosis was because of Death Star construction and mineral mining, but I could be making that up. But I liked that not only were they like listing movie planets, but they were sensical. Like, it made sense that these planets would be listed together. And it also kind of gives you an idea of just where Akiva would be. So I don't know, I really liked that. Oh, and here's where we get the first hints at the Operator. And I'm not going to talk about the Operator a whole lot right now, but we sure as heck are going to be talking about the Operator a lot later. Oh, we go into Chapter 12, and we have Timon's nightmare. So he has a nightmare, which is really a memory of the night his dad was taken away by the Empire. This nightmare really explains where a lot of Timon's anger comes from. I mean, he was just a little kid, right? I mean, he's an early to mid-teen now, but we see him as a much younger person, like losing his father like this, and then, you know, that just reinforces that shortly thereafter his mother was going to run off, leaving him alone. And we can kind of see where he's got this, like, I'm going to pretend like I don't care about anything kind of attitude. But what I really think is interesting is he's having this nightmare about his dad being taken away, and then he wakes up to find out his mom took him away. So I kind of wonder if that's not where a lot of his anger towards his mother going forward is going to kind of come from. I mean, obviously it's already there because of abandonment issues, but I just think it's kind of amusing. It's like, you literally took me just like the Empire took Dad. A lot else is going on in this chapter. The chapter 12 is kind of like, it almost felt like a season 2 opener of a TV show. Like, it hit almost every character that we've met so far in this book, and kind of set up where they were and how their paths are starting to intersect. We see Singer go after Jazz. He ends up getting captured, and so they're going to kind of connect here soon. But we also see more with Sloane, the kind of vying for power that Panadin Dandelion guy happens. There's not a whole lot that you can really dissect here, per se, besides Timon and Nora, other than it's just, we're getting a lot of plot set up here. But now what I really want to talk about is Interlude 5 on Utir. It's from the perspective of a character by the name of Pade, P-A-D-E, not like I paid for something. And he's a young wannabe stormtrooper. He's running off to the Imperial Academy, not unlike what Luke Skywalker wanted to do, only Luke wanted to be a pilot and not a stormtrooper. But he arrives at the Stormtrooper Academy to find it overrun by rebels. And this gets into some really, really interesting topics. Obviously, a military academy would be a military target in a war, right? It makes a lot of sense the rebels would hit it. It makes a lot of sense that they would want to stop the creation of new stormtroopers. And you really couldn't blame them. But then you realize, yeah, the Empire is raising stormtroopers from children, right? So when you hit this military target, there are going to be kids there. And there are going to be kids there that are getting militarized, that are going to become soldiers. And that hits this really, really terrible double-edged sword of, obviously you don't want to attack or hurt children. But if you don't do something, these children are going to grow up to hurt your children, right? And that's one of the ugly, ugly parts of war. But then, to this point, you know, you want to say, like, the Empire's doing this, but what ends up happening to Pade and a lot of the other characters from this interlude is they end up going off to the rebellion, right? They have nothing, they have no one, they don't have homes to return to. Some of them have homes that they don't want to return to. They just want to go to war. They're not really ideological about it, and they end up joining the Rebel Alliance. And there are heroes on both sides, evil is everywhere, right? I feel like Revenge of the Sith really tried to get into this point of sometimes both sides are doing bad things in the name of what they think is good, and it just gets ugly. And so I think this interlude is another kind of point of, but guys, let's realize what's really going on here. If you watch Star Wars Rebels, Ezra and Sabine are in the Rebel Alliance, and they're kids, right? They're teenagers. If you've read the Join the Resistance novels, you have that. If you watch the Clone Wars, Ahsoka was a teenager when she was going to war. Child soldiers are not anything new to the Star Wars universe, and it's actually kind of dark when you start to think about it in that way. I mean, yeah, the Jedi raised people to be Jedi from infancy. They weren't necessarily rushing them off to war, but you're certainly indoctrinating someone from a young age. The Sith were more so and worse. I mean, there you're literally taking an infant, and yeah, like Darth Maul's life was not a happy childhood, let's put it that way. One of the things I always like to bring up when we talk about Anakin Skywalker's character arc in the prequel trilogy, and a lot of people kind of wondering where a lot of Anakin's anger comes from, and a lot of his supposed whininess and his issues with the Jedi Order, a lot of people like to forget that he was a slave for the first 9 years of his life. Like, just because he seemed happy, sort of, with Watto, he was a slave, and we really don't know what went on in his day-to-day life, or how he felt, or how he was afraid for his mother at all these different points of time. I know it's kind of off topic to go to from just this one interlude, but I don't know, this interlude made me think again about how often we see young people in really ugly situations in Star Wars. I don't really have like a so what or a conclusion to that point. It's just one of those interesting to think about points. But that's really what I have to say about this book this week. For next week, let's read chapters 13 and 14. 14 is another kind of hefty chapter, so I think that'll be about the same amount of reading as last week. As always, please leave a comment. I love knowing what you guys are thinking about the story so far. It's great talking to you. Make sure you're following us at Port Haven Forums on Twitter and visit port-haven.com for even more. And I'll see you next week.